and welcome to our Point of View talk show. We are so glad that you are able to join us this evening. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce our hosts. We have Captain Jackson. How are you?
What up, what up, what up, everybody? How's everybody doing today?
And we have Lynette Jackson. Hi, Miss Lynette.
Hello, everybody.
And we have Derek Jackson, our state representative for 664.
Jackson 3.
Yeah,
The three Jacksons.
yeah.
That's so great. And we have our guest for today. We're going to be talking about the coronavirus and the vaccine, the update. So, of course, we have back with us Dr. Kay Stevens and Meaty Bardinelli. Welcome, ladies, or should I say doctor or nurse? Or okay.
Thank you for having us.
How are you guys doing?
Wonderful.
Good, good. So, Meaty, we're going to go ahead and start with you. So just give us an update of what you have going on, because we've been following you since December with everything that's going on with you, because you had your you had the vaccine first, and then after that you actually contracted the virus. So go ahead and talk to us about your update. What's going on with you, please?
So actually effective today. Thank you again, Jacqueline, for having me on, and good to see you all beautiful faces today. I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm well. And I am now had to increase my dose of blood pressure medication. So that's my update. So for those of you who are just now watching, I am a registered nurse. I'm chair of the DC Board of Nursing here in Washington, DC. And I work at a large medical center of over, we have an average daily census of over 700 patients, and I'm a nursing director. And I took the first dose of the vaccine on December 23rd. I tested for COVID on the 4th. My test came back positive on the 5th of January. I was in quarantine several days after that, and about a week post recovery, going back to work, felt some pressure, tension on my back of my neck and my shoulders. Being the cardiac ICU nurse that I am, I used to take care of open heart surgery patients. That's what I did before I went into leadership. And my blood pressure was 165 over 15, 115. Wow. And so everybody should gasp just as I did, because clearly that is stroke level type blood pressure. It's definitely hypertension, what we call in clinical setting, hypertension urgency. And so called a friend, of course, cardiologist, put me on medications, made sure I was seen, had a battery of tests done, EKG, had ultrasound on my aorta, my kidney function, my kidney arteries as well. Everything was good there, but my blood pressure was high. I have a family history of hypertension with my father. My brother, I lost at the tender age of 33 of an aortic aneurysm due to hypertension. However, I intentionally kept my workout clothes on because I just finished getting 4.5 miles in. And I'm an avid runner. I've run several marathons. I'm not overweight. I'm healthy, no past medical issues at all. And my blood pressure was extremely high. And it's kind of tempered down somewhat. I took it the last couple of days. I'm hovering around the mid 140s with a bottom number, what we call our diastolic number, which represents when your heart is at rest, was still in the mid to high 90s, which is still high. And so contacted the cardiologist and said, yep, let's go up on your medication. It's called amlodipine. It's a calcium channel blocker that helps calcium enters and exits your cells, particularly in your cardiac muscles. And so hopefully that is something that can allow you to reduce your hypertension. And unfortunately, mine, it got, like I said, it's better, but it's still not where it needs to be. And I could still feel that tension a little bit. I can still feel the pressure in the back of my neck. And so I'm going from 5 to now 10 milligrams. And as I shared with you all a couple of weeks ago, after seeing him, he noted significantly, actually called me and was like, you're like the 4th person that week that had came in. After me, he had 4 other people come in who were having hypertension with no history of hypertension, but came in after being diagnosed with COVID. So my message is just simple for all of us, that Black individuals, obviously I'm Black, Black and brown individuals already deal with a multitude of comorbidities, not necessarily some of them genetic, but some of them just due to lack of access, inadequate access to healthcare, health inequities and disparities. But a lot of times we need to make sure that we are following up with our physicians. So before we start the show, my message to anyone who's watching, that if you have recovered from COVID, please make sure you go see your physician or your PA. Make sure that you're getting, your basic lab results taken to make sure your kidney functions are fine, your blood sugars are okay. Make sure your vital signs, your blood pressure is checked. As Dr. K, I'm sure will share with her level of expertise, we're still learning about the COVID virus. Here in DC, it will be 1 year on March 12th that DC was on lockdown, I believe, and yesterday represented the very first case that we had at my hospital a year ago, yesterday, actually. It was exactly a year ago when we had our first case. And so don't take it for granted. Make sure you're following up with your physician. And if you didn't have COVID, please make sure that you have seen your doctor, because it's now been a year. So if you haven't seen your dentist, your doctor, women, if you haven't gone to your OBGYN, men, if you haven't got your prostate checked, if you haven't seen your physician as well, if you're in that age group, if you haven't gotten your colonoscopy and you're due for it, please make sure you do. So my 3-4 minute update, Jackie, that's where I am.
Okay. So Midi, once you recover from the coronavirus and you get your second dose of the vaccine, will your blood pressure go back to normal? Or are they saying this is just a side effect, or are you going to have high blood pressure for the rest of your life?
So what they're indicating now is that this could, and they're still studying it, but it's definitely noted now that there are some inflammatory processes that take place post-COVID. And so I'm still kind of within that window. So I'm still not a full 90 days out from my initial diagnosis of COVID. And so the hope and the expectation is that within, a couple of months that I will be able to be weaned off and everything will be okay. I eat vegan now 3 days a week. No meats. The stuff that I do cook, I add no salt to it anymore. And even when I did cook before, I only used a little bit of sea salt or Himalayan pink sea salt because it's not iodized. And actually, I have a smoothie right here that I'm eating with some kale and blueberries and almonds in it now. And so I do that 3 days out of the week. And so that's kind of where I am, with the hope and expectation that those interventions will quickly help my blood pressure to get back to its normal state.
Okay.
Hey, Midi, would you call that kind of like being an intermittent vegan?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. Intermittent vegan, because Lord knows I love my meat.
Right.
I could be a vegan as long as I can have bacon periodically. But no, I do it and I'm not a huge meat eater anyway. Like I eat meat, but I'm not a person that needs a lot. Typically, even if I get a steak, I'm like, give me the 4 or 6 ounce filet. Like I don't eat a lot of meat, but I do eat meat. And so that is just kind of hopefully, as most of you all know, my cardiologist believes in CPR, or TLC rather, total lifestyle change. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to be that person, nor am I purporting for people just to immediately go to medications. But again, understanding where my blood pressure was 165 with a diastolic of 115, that if I've been sitting like that for the past several weeks or so, I mean, that could be a stroke.
Right. And I think it's good that you mentioned that for someone who perhaps wants to transition to becoming a vegan or taking more charge in their lifestyle in terms of how they eat. That's probably not a bad thing to do, right? To do that intermittently, start off slow, kind of ease your body into it because it is a lifestyle change, and then go from there. I think that's a takeaway, a good takeaway from your update.
Absolutely. And what I can say, even my husband and son sometimes, because, it's hard when you're in a house and one person is, vegan and another person isn't, they will still join me with this, smoothie journey and we tend to do that anyway, but we do that more so than often now. And my husband's very conscientious and he'll say, hey, well, what do you want to eat or what can you eat? So they might go and get something to eat, but then I'll get the really good salad or something like that. So it definitely needs to be kind of a collective effort, which quite frankly has a benefit to all of us. And if you just look on the back of the foods that we eat, not that I don't like chips, so I'm not here to say, stop doing what you're doing and go cold turkey. But when you really look at it, and again, Dr. K, that's kind of more so her wheelhouse. When you look at the things that you put in your body, just literally read the back of the packages. And like, you can't even pronounce half of the stuff that you're actually eating. And so those processed foods in general aren't that healthy for you anyway. Right. And so trying to eat more raw, trying to have more vegetables, decrease the amount of salt that you're taking, because obviously salt increases hypertension. So those type of things are definitely something I think we can all take away, regardless of your COVID status.
Yeah. So, Meaty, listen, we at our point of view, our audience and us, we've been following your journey, and I mean, let's just face it, right? The education of this noble virus, as we continue to try to build awareness around it. And we're, to your point, we're 12 months into this. Black and brown people are still skeptical, right? And so, how can we, continue to educate not just our point of view audience, but how do we educate the Black and brown community? Because I was just reading just recently, this past week, a couple of days ago, where disproportionately Black and brown still fall behind in getting vaccinated. They still have little to no health care. A lot of places where in the Black and brown communities, we have food deserts, right? And so it's great that we've been following your journey, and it educates us and it builds awareness. But how do we get through all the skepticism still?
I think at this point, and great question, Representative Jackson, and good to see you again, my brother. I think at this point, it's really one-on-one conversations. I mean, for me to sit here and tell people to wash your hands and social distance and wear a mask is a moot point. I mean, it's been a year. So literally, unless you are deaf, dumb, and mute, and I mean that literally and figuratively, then I can't make you do that at this point, right? I think we all know that it was overly politicized from the very beginning. I think that we had very inconsistent messaging from the very beginning. Now we have a shift in administrations. And so quite frankly, yes, COVID is there. We all know that we just unfortunately reached the 500,000 people who have died in 12 months. So if you don't think that it's real, if you're still skeptic, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure what to say. Other than you really have to start having one-on-one conversations. People like myself, most of you all follow me as well. I do Facebook Lives, and people have texted me and said, well, you haven't been on Facebook as much giving the lives, and we need your updates. I don't even listen to CNN. I always go to your page to try to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And I was like, really? Oh my goodness. And so I think people like me sharing your individual story, obviously it's personal. You guys don't need to know my blood pressure is high. I don't need you to know that I'm on blood pressure meds, but if my story can share and hopefully influence in a positive manner. And I am a nurse, and if you know me personally, there's no political gain. Representative Jackson, you and Jackie aren't paying me to be on here. Kay and I are just here, just sharing information. And I think it takes people like us to really be open and authentic and sharing that. And then before Jackie moves on, I'll just share here in the District of Columbia, we are absolutely, again, you can go to coronavirus.dc.gov. The stats are there. I know most of you guys are down in the Georgia area, but DC is divvied up into 8 wards and are more, dare I say, that the wards that tend to be less socioeconomically advantaged, and Kay knows this, over in Southeast and Southwest DC, when she was here at Howard, typically it's wards 7 and 8, which is what we call east of the river. There's a river that divides DC called the Anacostia, and that absolutely is a food desert. There's literally 3 grocery stores to service over 180,000 people. I live in Ward 5, which is not far from Howard University, and there's a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, a Giant, a Safeway. I mean, within 4 miles of my home, I can probably get to 4 or 5 different grocery stores. So in another ward, for 2 wards, 2, and Kay knows what I'm talking about, and Ward 7 and 8, there's literally 3 grocery stores. So when you talk about the processed foods, when you talk about if you want to make that TLC, that total lifestyle change, like I am, and as Captain Jackson mentioned about, doing intermittent vegan eating and making sure that you're trying to eat more fruits and vegetables. Well, all those people in Ward 7 and 8 there are no Whole Foods over there. There aren't any fresh vegetables. All they have are the liquor stores on the corner and the Chinese or other carry out, fried chicken carry outs, the pizza places. So it's very hard for you to try to go and do what I'm doing if you live there and you don't have a vehicle. So to answer your question is, we just have to keep doing it. You got to talk to your constituents. You have to talk to people in your family. Wards 3 and 4 here in DC alone, over 6,000 people have been vaccinated with both of their doses. 6,000. Wards 7 and 8 that I just mentioned to you, the number is only 1,800. Wow. And to put it in perspective, wards 3 and 4 here in DC, that's all upper Northwest. That's all, you guys all see the National Cathedral, all of that, where the high influence, predominantly white neighborhoods are literally 6,000 plus people are vaccinated. Whereas over in Ward 7 and 8, literally only 1,800 people. And those statistics are on the website, coronavirus.dc.gov. So I'm proud to be a member, chair of the Board of Nursing. And I know that our mayor is doing our best. And I want to be clear, it's not because they can't get it, it's because of skepticism, which is what you said.
And that's what we're trying to fight through. I mean, because let's face it, Dr. K, right? You're an epidemiologist. This herd immunity, we need, at least to my knowledge, and I'm no doctor, right? I'm just the elected official, but I understand math. That is true. But think about it. You need at least 75% of our population vaccinated, right? We had to do this with smallpox, mumps and measles, right? I'm sure Meaty can give us all the things that we have to get vaccinated for, right? During my 22 plus years in the Navy, I got more shots than I can shake a stick at because I had to go and conduct missions in countries that require for me to get certain shots. And so Biden and Harris administration, they're doing what they can. They've increased the production of vaccines being produced and manufactured, right? They're working through the logistics and the distribution. But it's hard to tell, Mr. or Mrs. Jane and John Doe that we have to get this done. But you got this conspiracy group out there that's going live and well on social media that's planting these seeds of doubt, right? They can look at media and say, this is a healthcare practitioner. They can hear Dr. K, you can break all the stats down, but Dr. K, over 500,000 people are dead, right? There's some empty chairs in the dining room table because of the coronavirus. So Dr. K, can you share with our audience, right? Just like the flu shot, there's all these different various strands that's been dominating the news lately. And my humble opinion, we're going to have to get a vaccination shot annually. Just like how we get the flu shot, I believe that, even after we get 75% herd immunity, that every year, I think we're going to have to get a coronavirus vaccination shot, just like we get the flu shot, because of the various strands.
But before you guys say something real quick, it's real funny you should say that about everybody there. Well, not everyone, but there are a lot of people that are skeptical about getting the shot. It's really amazing to me how we have so many parents that have gotten their kids their shots, or they couldn't go to school if they didn't get a certain shot. That when they get to when they find out, when they're in school and they go to school and the counselor says, well, they're missing this shot or that shot, or they're told, They'll run them. They don't know what they're giving them. They have no clue, but they'll give them the shot. They'll make sure so they can get into school. Now, I think the ratio of the people that are passed as opposed to the people who are passed with the shot, I think that speaks volumes. That should tell the story in itself. Okay. I don't want to be a part of the 500,000 people who passed. Okay. The chance that I want to take is me trying to live as opposed to not getting the shot, getting corona, because I did have it too, and it was not fun. Okay. And I had it in January. I felt like Mike Tyson was killing me. Okay. And it was really bad for me to the point to where I thought one day I was going to have to go to the hospital. I would get the shot any day as opposed to being on the other side. I don't want to be a part of the numbers that they have to the right and see on CNN. Okay. But again, we are skeptical, and I say our Black and brown people, we're skeptical, but I think we're skeptical in the wrong ways. Like you're saying, they're paying attention to too much TV or Google or the conspiracy theorists that are talking about why you shouldn't get it. But if your child needed it, if it became a part of their shot record and they need it, they're going to give it to them. And that is my biggest issue out of this whole thing. Well, go ahead, doctor or nurse, whichever one that was replying.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're right, State Representative Jackson. There are right now 5 strains of concern. So we know about the UK strain, and then the South African strain, which are giving us some pause because it's a little bit more aggressive. There's a Brazilian strain that's becoming a little bit more aggressive. One from actual Spain, and then there's a California strain here in the U.S. that is really becoming a variant of concern as well, especially with the vaccines that we have out now. And so it's important right now to get vaccinated, particularly if you have any of the conditions that would make you really predisposed to some of the more, I guess, extreme effects of COVID. Like if you already have the high blood pressure, if you know you already have diabetes, and just anything that puts your body in a place where it can't fight COVID, then you should probably be vaccinated. Mm. And that's what people don't understand. They look at it, and it's really funny because I get so upset. Like I've really had to minimize my social media time because I look at Facebook, Instagram, and people are saying all kind of crazy things, and that when you get vaccinated, they're putting the trackers in you, and it's
unbelievable. You're right. And
I'm like, trackers? I was like, so, but why they track you using your phone?
Social security number too. Track you.
I was like, they don't have to put anything in you because you're not gonna leave your phone anywhere, and even if you leave it in the car, they can at least get in the car.
And there's GPS in your car too, so trust me, Uncle Sam will find you.
That's right.
I'm like, y'all post where you are. If you in your section buying bottles, you posted that.
Exactly.
You know, so you're worried about a vaccine, and I was like, well, what would be the point? Because the other countries, the citizens in other countries, they're not. That's the least of their concerns. Their concern is there a vaccine available for us? Exactly. And I don't know, y'all. It's
baffling. I just don't get it.
I don't understand. And then two, I also just wanted to bring up some other. So there is some situation, and again, like I said, I'm doing some consulting work with the state of Georgia. And so I don't know if you guys are aware, like the Albany situation where they said they had the vaccine sites and they were basically empty. Yeah. And so.
Say that again.
They were empty?
Yeah, I heard about that story.
And so people were driving from all over the state of Georgia to Albany to get vaccinated. And so the issue was they thought, well, they're empty because the people don't want to be vaccinated, or there's that vaccine hesitancy. But what we're realizing, because and even just the president of Albany State University, because she was just really concerned, people don't know how to register. And a lot of these vulnerable populations, when you think about in a lot of the southern part of Georgia, there's a digital divide. And so when I was
talked about that last time, Dr. K,
yes,
great point.
yes, it's a digital divide. I know people in South Georgia that I literally on the weekends now I'm calling, trying to help them like make appointments for their loved ones. Columbus, Georgia.
And you can get a shot there, and you can get your shot. They said that they have so many vials there that they're just sitting and waiting for people. And yesterday I had a friend say she was going to take her mom to Albany because they're
the distribution is a whole nother part of the conversation too, right? So there's a whole thing of like that Representative Jackson was saying and Dr. K was answering about the hesitancy is one point. The other part is just on how to access it, right? How do I do that? I mean, I'm trying to register my own husband. People are like, can't you do it? I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not going to lose my job. But even trying to go and figure out how to do it, it's a little cumbersome. And so when you talk about health literacy,
right,
this is kind of complicated.
And unfortunately, that's where we are. And so we take for granted. And, you know, so people who don't really understand, so the people that are in place that's kind of coming up with these registration mechanisms. So they're like, well, if they don't have Wi-Fi at home, they can go to the library. I said, well, the libraries are closed.
Yeah.
And the ones that are open, you have to go online to make an appointment.
But a lot of elderly over 65 can't even, they don't know how to do that. They don't know what you're doing.
So State Representative Jackson, these are community issues. So for somebody like me that has a footprint in the community, not just in what I do, but this is my community. I grew up here. I've been volunteering for over 25 years, just in the community at large, from faith-based organizations to communities of other communities of color to communities with developmental delays. That is access. And a mom that has a child with a developmental delay does not have time to sit in front of a computer waiting for an appointment to open.
You know, and this is the scary part, right? The scary part that these last 12 months across the United States, the coronavirus has been somewhat a blessing in disguise too. What do I mean by that? Because for government, both federal and state, it has demonstrated how fragile our healthcare system is, right? I mean, this is more than just talking about, do we have enough beds? Do we have enough staff? Do we have enough modernization in the equipment and the capability and capacity? You know, it could be the coronavirus one day, but it could be an earthquake or a tornado. I mean, we just witnessed in Texas, right, the devastation of a snowstorm basically shut the entire state of Texas down, and people died. And so we have to do a better job, the greatest country in the world, to put our money where our mouth is and to make sure that healthcare is not just a right, but we take care of those who are on the front line, doctors, nurses. I mean, we're asking them to do things that they did not anticipate doing when they were going through that whole process of becoming doctors and nurses. We got to listen to science and not politicize this. I mean, I want to go back to the point just for our point of view audience, right? And we laugh and chuckle because it doesn't make sense to us, right? We're trying to make sure that you stay alive. It's no different than, to Meady's point, getting your annual healthcare checkup, right? For men and women, right? Now is not the time to allow for your pride and your ego get in your way, right? And so when I think about those conspiracy theorists out there, and if you're watching our point of view, right, we're not making fun of you, but what you're saying is not making sense, because you get on an airplane, you don't know the pilot, you don't know the flight attendants, you don't know if the equipment is functional on an airplane, but yet you blindly get on the airplane,
and go to
fasten
sleep.
your seatbelt, you listen to the instructions of the flight attendant,
No, they don't.
and you do exactly what they say, because you know if you don't, they're going to dismiss you from that airplane.
But Representative
And
Jackson,
so
how about
if
this?
you're going to fly blindly, then why wouldn't you listen to a nurse like Meady, the chair of the board of nurses, or Dr. K that deals with, right? Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that?
Hey, Jack. So let me let me do this. Let me walk on the side of folks that are having some challenges accepting that. I believe they're unpacking it and they're having to come around, and they're coming around, okay, by seeing individuals such as Meady and Dr. K and hearing you. But there are people in large numbers that are still trying to get over these past 4 years we had. We basically, and call for what it is, we basically had a racist in the office at the highest level and made no qualms about expressing his feelings about Black folks and people of color, straight up. And that on top of the way people already felt as it is already, considering what happened in Tuskegee and considering what happens in these streets and so forth and so forth and so on in all professions. We know that racism and discrimination exists in healthcare, in politics, in government, in just hometown USA. So I believe it is a welcomed relief to have the current administration in there to where we don't even have to worry about going to the CNNs and the MSNBCs, and for those folks that like to watch Fox, watching those channels, trying to hear what the latest chatter is and to see just how much more they're going to beat us down on. I mean, Black folk have really caught it, not just recently, have been catching it. So there's a process, I believe, that people have to start accepting the information, doing their research, not just depending on what's on the news, but listening to professionals like us all. We all are professionals in our own right, and we bring some great knowledge to this table, which makes this show really great. But people have their hesitancies, and I understand it. And while there are conspiracy theories that may be displaced or not necessarily relevant, there's some hesitancy. That's why there's a big push to get this information out to as many people as possible. That situation down in Albany at one point, it was a hotbed down there. They didn't have anything, really. You got a hotbed in South Georgia with folks that look like us, and you don't have any shops down there? For real?
So Captain Jackson, how do we negate that though? I think for me, that's kind of where I am, as I said before. No longer are my messages, oh, wear your mask, oh, N95, to cover your face, whatever it is. I don't care if you put a scarf, whatever it is, just
right.
cover your face. But my problem with that as a nurse, and I want to actually shift out of COVID, because this is no longer a COVID conversation. This is the same conversation, and I'm going to err clearly on the side of caution, because I have three other beautiful Black sisters on here with me. You can see I have my little workout bra and everything. I just went outside and got my 4 miles in. I was on a trail, and my husband and I saw at least 200 plus people on this trail. The number of Black women that I saw, because I'm very conscientious of it, was 5 out of 200 to 300 people. The number of Black men that I saw that were either jogging or walking, I think 4. out of 300 people. We have to take care of ourselves. We can no longer, listen, if COVID doesn't get us, it's going to be something else. If it's not racist police officers, it's going to be something else. If it's not bad school systems, it's something else. I am now of the position in my own personal life as now a middle-aged woman that I feel that we have to control our own lives and our own destiny, and we have to educate ourselves. I don't even want anybody on here just to listen to me. Don't even listen to Dr. K, because you don't know me. But if you've ever seen a physician, he or she, you've given them blind trust. Representative Jackson talked about you hop on an airplane. Forget the airplane. How about you get in the car every day? You are driving with people who are driving 1 to 2 ton vehicles next to you. You don't know if I'm sleep deprived. You don't know if I'm drunk. You don't even know if I have an active license, but you're just having blind faith. So at some point, regardless if it's COVID, regardless if it's politics, regardless if it's whatever it is, own what is happening to you and your community. You can no longer just care about yourself. My life, and I really reflected and asked God, I am a woman of faith, unapologetically, and I'll say it. What is my purpose outside of being a wife and a mother to my son? Like, to really serve people, because it truly is the quote of Shirley Chisholm that service is the rent that we pay for the life that we're living right now here on earth. That's how I pay back. So if I'm not like the Sankofa bird, where I'm not looking back to help other people, if I'm not like, I'm a member of Delta, if I'm not like our Fortitude statue, where I'm rising forward, but I have a hand back, bringing someone alongside of me. Just because it's COVID, you guys, COVID is just a symptom. I thought we would have figured this out back with Katrina.
Yeah.
How come Katrina could not have gotten a cruise ship to go right down there? I've been in New Orleans many times. How come you could not have gotten a cruise ship to go right down there to the Mississippi, get those people on those cruise ships and get them out of there? But it didn't happen, right? Same thing here in DC. How is it that in wards 3 and 4, I have 6,000 plus people in the District of Columbia who are predominantly white in that neighborhood that are vaccinated, but ward 7 and 8, there's only 1,800 people that are fully vaccinated. That's us. And we have to, at some point, we have to be knowledgeable, and we Black and brown people like us on this screen, we got to go back in those communities, and we have to help those people who don't have the same knowledge that we do. We have to help them, because they did, to use your point, Captain Jackson, yes, you had an individual in office who clearly didn't care about us. He verbalized it, and dare I say, not that we not had others, it's just that he verbalized his in a manner in which it was undeniable. Trust me. So you got to look at policies. Policies dictate more than just what you say out of your mouth. But regardless of that, we now have to do the extra work to recover the minds and the pessimism of so many of these individuals out there, because there are some people who still voted for that same individual. I think I said that to you guys a couple of weeks ago when we met. Yeah. And because they're like, well, it doesn't matter. Voting doesn't matter. Representative Jackson knows, of all people on the screen, your vote does count.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'll just shut up, but just simply to say is that we have to do better, and we have to get on Facebook. We have to get on IG. We got to get on Snapchat. Captain, Representative Jackson, get in your car, go walk around there, get 5 or 6 people, knock on doors, let them see you, find a nurse down there in Atlanta. I'll come down there one day and let's have, like, stand out in the corner with the megaphone, answer questions, we have to get back to the grassroots of helping our folks, because of the psychological damage that we are a constantly traumatized group of individuals. And so we have to continue to do what we're doing via this modem right now that we're doing on being online, but also physically getting into our communities. And people like me, we have to be vulnerable. I'm a healthy individual with no health issues. I got COVID. Now I'm dealing with high blood pressure, which literally could have killed me, but the grace of God, because I'm walking around with a blood pressure of 165 over 115.
Yeah.
And
so, Meaty, so you prompted 2 questions, and it's a good segue, because I want to go back to what my sister Jackson, when she was talking about children and how children get vaccinated, right? And children get vaccinated, and parents make sure that their children get those shots so they can go to school. And I want to go back to that point, because that's our big challenge right now. And we watched President Biden and his administration so far trying to tackle that huge question that parents with children in school and media. I know your son is in school, or you have a school-age son, and so our audience, our point of view audience, they're parents, and they're trying to figure it out. I got to send my child to school, and I got to go to work, and I got to try to bring some sense of normalcy. But my two questions for you all this evening is simple as this. What is the psychological impact on our children, right? I mean, they don't understand sheltering in place. They don't understand you can't touch and hold their friends. They don't understand, Meaty, how to be 6 feet apart because, they're a third grader or heck, even eighth graders, right, and playing in sports. And I know your son plays sports. And so what is the psychological impact on children, right? Nevada, a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about an increase in teen suicides, right? And they are all trying to relate this to COVID. Let's talk about that.
Domestic violence. Think about domestic violence. We haven't even seen those numbers yet.
Right.
I'll say this. The one thing that's adding to vaccine hesitancy and why parents will vaccinate their children, the childhood immunizations are FDA approved. These vaccines are not approved yet. They're
still EUA.
Still EUA because they don't have enough data to say, okay, you're gonna have post whatever. They just don't know. We just don't know enough. And that's where a lot of the hesitancy is coming. And then when it comes to like our children, I am a lead for a mentoring program of high school students. And I this past Sunday, I actually had a psychologist to come in and talk to the teens just about coping. And it's basically something that they requested because they want to know how to cope because they're home and they're tired of just sitting in front of computers. But they're scared to go to school because they don't want to bring something home to kill their parents or their grandma, or they don't want to get sick themselves. I've had a couple of the students in my program that got COVID because they started out having like virtual cheerleading practice, and then they met in person and started practicing, and then somebody, had COVID.
It's funny you should say that about the data. They don't have enough data, but if you know that 500,000 people are dead, that's a chance that I think you should take. And I agree with one of you when you said that unless it happened to you, because it has. My father passed last month from COVID, 3 days. So when it happens, unless it happens to you to understand, then I think you rethink that when you see it firsthand.
And Lynette, we still have healthcare providers who don't want it. And I have to say this as a disclaimer. I am not here as a representative for the organization upon which I work. This is just basic information, so I just want to put that out there. But we're not even at 80%. And we have, and I want to be clear, this isn't Albany. This isn't, my grandmother and them live down in Jacksonville, Georgia, which is like a town of probably like 1,000 people. Nope, this is Washington, D.C. And we got plenty of vaccine where we are. And if you need it, you can get it. And we're not even at 80%.
Wow.
Healthcare providers. So there's a lot of hesitancy, you guys, not just with my own team, that I can speak of. I have a few people who I know that have had cancer. And so I completely get that because, and I'm sure you would appreciate that, Dr. K. Hey, I'm not sure, I had cancer like 3 years ago. I don't know if this is going to trigger because it's a protein, blah, blah, blah. Got it. No problem. Other people, religious issues, somebody might be a Jehovah's Witness or something like, hey, I'm not sure. Not a problem. But there's still a few people who just, I'm not sure. And I can tell you, those people are all Black and brown. Every single one of them. All of my white colleagues, my white team members, wards 3 and 4 that I said to you is predominantly white. We have been scarred, as Captain Jackson said. And from the very beginning of this, with the highly politicized thing about COVID, the blame game, using these numbers, oh, I'm going to fast track the vaccine, not really articulating Dr. Kizzy Corbett has been working on this for the last 8 or 9 years. Messaging is key. And this, Representative Jackson, like messaging is key, right? You have to control the narrative. Right now, Captain Jackson, we have to get back hold to this narrative. They need to see me, Kenyatta, Black and brown faces who received the vaccine or are working on the vaccine or can really speak truth to power and give you real knowledge. That's what we need. And to your point, Representative Jackson, my own son, I have no problem sharing. I've been very transparent. He did go to school, but after I got sick, he didn't want to go back. So he's now home. He hasn't been back since I had COVID. And he did go, and he was one of the few kids that were going, and he's in a private school. And I feel very comfortable, Dr. K, with their social distancing stuff. They have the little things up against the desk, and it was only like 5 or 6 kids. But my son was like, well, mommy, what if they don't, wear their mask right? And I don't want them to be sick, and I don't want to have to get quarantined like you were. So the psychological impact is real. And he's an only child on top of that. So he has 2 old parents, not old, but you know what I mean? I'm not old. He has 2 parents.
You're far from it.
He has 2 parents and it's just him. So that's a lot. 2 educated, employed, good roof over your head parents in a household. Think about those parents who don't even have a fraction of what I do, and I'm highly blessed. And so that's a whole other part. We don't have domestic violence issues. We're not food insecure. We're able to go to the grocery store. We're able to do all of those things. I haven't, by the grace of God, lost my job. Neither has my husband. And so I think that mental strain for those families who have gone through that, it's real. It's absolutely real. And even me, to be very honest, when I sit back and think that I worked 14 to 16 weeks of work straight every single day, I don't know if I really dealt with my own trauma. There's a book that one of my nurses, my staff members gave me called The Stewardship of Trauma. And you could appreciate this, Representative Jackson, being in the military, and you too, Captain Jackson, with your line of work that you've dealt with, is that so many times people like us, when we see stuff every day, we're like, oh, it's going to be okay. Well, that might not be okay for Dr. K. Right. That may not be okay for Jackie if they haven't I did CPR on over 100 plus people, if not more, in my career. I've seen hundreds of people die, like literally. So when my own brother died of an aortic aneurysm, my dad called and said, hey, he had a heart attack. I'm like, oh, okay, well, do I need to come today or can I come tomorrow? Because I have been so desensitized with the trauma that I've experienced. And so with this COVID thing, all of us need to kind of pause and really reflect upon how are we handling this? And all of us on this call, we're employed, we're not in a homeless shelter. We're not dealing with any of the things that so many other people have dealt with. So imagine how we're dealing with it and think about those people who aren't as blessed as we are. And that's just from a strictly monetary, having a roof over your head type position. So great question. I don't have an answer other than we have to make sure we keep checking on each other, making sure that you're really taking a pause. And when people say they're okay, well, what does that mean? Oh, I'm good. Okay. Well, define good? What does that mean?
Right.
We also definitely need to check in often with our kids. And because they're not just processing this from their own personal experiences, but they're internalizing what their friends are going through. Because I asked the question during our the meeting I had on Sunday with the teens in the mentoring program. And I said, well, how many of your classmates have now had to get jobs to help support the family? And over half of them raised their hands.
Are you serious?
It's very common. It's not just here. And because I look at numbers, I don't just look at the disease. I look at the downstream impacts and implications as far as like housing, education, and economics, which most people don't even do. Because again, like I said, I volunteer. I have a footprint in the community, and it's just not a job or something that I do. And so I reached out. So when I saw the numbers, I reached out to some of my educator friends, and they were like, yeah, You know, some of my colleagues have to have online class at night because they have students during the day that has to help their younger siblings because their parents are at work. So they can't sit in front of a computer because they're having to leave the household. And so I have to meet with them at night. And so she was like, I get them when I can. And so even when schools are open, most of the kids won't return. One of the students, even that was in my program, that's in my program currently, was saying, yeah, well, one of my classmates was working at Walmart. Now they're at the Amazon distribution center. They're not going back into the classroom. Because,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food, clothing, shelter.
absolutely.
Yep.
Because mama and daddy got laid off, they can't find a job, unemployment is still high. So there's so many things that are going on that haven't even been addressed when it comes to COVID, the pandemic, and Black and Brown communities. And so health equity is more than just a shot.
Exactly.
You know, I often wonder, and I hate using this term, new normal. And, you know, and when Jacqueline said, you know, we're going to follow Meaty, and I was like, we were all like, yes, we're on board. But during this journey, not just those things around coronavirus came out following, you know, Meaty's journey. We also learned how fragile, as I said earlier, our healthcare system. Those, you know, I remember, you know, I'm dating myself. I'm 55, but I remember there were like 7 different socioeconomic classes, right? You got the high, you know, middle, high, low, middle, high, low class, right? Barely low, right? Now we just have the haves and the have-nots. And I say that tongue in cheek because right now we're battling during this legislative session how, you know, can immediate family members, right? When Lynette was talking about her dad passing away from the coronavirus, what is that like, right? So a nurse like Meaty or a physician holding the hand of your loved one, because normally, you know, they'll call the family in, right? Because they could sort of see the, you know, all the signs. I know when my mother transitioned from this world to glory, you know, they were able to call us in because, you know, certain amount of oxygen and of her kidneys, and right. So when you have healthcare professionals, you know, like Meaty saying you got to call the family in, we were all there, right? I had my mother in the ICU. I had her, you know, holding her, right, as she took her last breath. So is this our new normal? Because we're fighting with legislation to determine if a person is diagnosed with coronavirus, that there's a protocol out there, and once we, depending on how this legislation goes, will determine. And I'm sure Georgia's not the only state that's wrestling with this legislation. You know, are we going to get to the point where if a family member is in the hospital, that we won't be able to see our loved ones take their final breath, right?
Exactly.
If they're diagnosed with coronavirus?
What you're saying is exactly what happened. We could not. I had to see my father through a window to say my goodbyes. And they said that it was airborne and it was a chance. But at that time, I didn't catch it from there. And he still had COVID even after death. So there was no funeral. There was nothing. So I'm still mourning and still in shock, you know. So when you talk about that, that is it's almost like you're therapy bound at this because it's not, you know, like you said, it's not complete. You know, when you can hug and say I love you and say your goodbyes, and then the funeral, it's not complete. So it's not complete for me, but how do you complete it? You know, and you can't. I mean, what can you do? So it's still, and it always hurts, but I think it hurts twice as bad when you can't close it shut. It can't be closed. It's not closed the way you're used to having it closed shut. You know, it's just not possible. No funeral, nothing. No burial, nothing. And when you have COVID, and he had it and he died so suddenly, he still had COVID. Can't touch him. You can't. They can't prepare him. Nothing. He had to be cremated. So it's very disheartening to know that unfortunately there's nothing that we can do. And honestly, he was a month away from possibly getting the shot because I was so adamant about making sure my mother was getting the shot. I signed her for everywhere in Georgia I knew how. Somebody ended up calling her. I don't know who it was, but I thank God because I did it so many times. I didn't know who it was who reached out to her, but she was able to get her shot, and she's up next week. She gets her second dose.
You know what, can I just say to you on behalf of healthcare providers, your trauma, and clearly hear my heart, by no means am I minimizing, because that was your father, your loved one. But we deal with that in such a different way that we internalize it too, because, you know, we don't know these people. And then when stuff is happening, like, just naturally as nurses root word is like to nurture, right? That's what we do. And to be a physician, you know, to care for, to help people. It is so disheartening for us to not be able to have people come in. And mind you, this isn't just for COVID. I mean, you know, a really dear friend of mine, and she wouldn't mind me sharing because it's public, you know, she went through breast cancer, stage 4. I shared this with Jackie and Representative Jackson early on, and Captain Jackson last year. She was diagnosed at the beginning in March. Like, she was diagnosed in February, and the February got her mammo, all of this stuff, got the diagnosis like in the middle of March. So this is like at the height when everybody was like, don't touch the doorknob. You know, everybody was like literally in the house, right? I-95 had like 2 cars on it. And so when she was going through this, her husband literally, and she had no history, very healthy, nothing, literally just went to get a mammogram, boom, stage 4 cancer. He dropped her off at the door, had to go back home and sit and wait. He couldn't even be there. And, you know, so he's calling me like every hour, like literally grown man in tears, crying, like just trying to figure out how do I can't even be there for my wife. So I can only but imagine you and your father, because at my hospital, I had a friend of mine, very first COVID death that I experienced, again, early on, where she was literally less than 10 feet away. Our ICUs have glass doors, you know, where the actual bed is. And so she stood there, watched the respiratory therapist extubate her dad, and watched the flat line on the EKG machine for her father to go into asystole. And I'm standing there, and I never met her dad. And I was doing my best. I mean, I've seen death many times with what it is that I do. And I'm holding her hand, and her husband was there playing gospel music. And she literally was like, she could not touch her father. And she was like less than 10 feet away. So I just want to let you know that we so empathize with all of our family, because we then in turn become the family in your stead, because you're not there to hold their hand. And think about the other patients who are getting heart surgery and kidney transplants and all the other things that are still going on in the world outside of COVID. No one can be there. I have a dear friend of mine whose son just got admitted to the hospital here as well, and dad couldn't come, and, you know, he's protective, and mom is there. And so, you know, they're married, and it was just, you know, well, who can come, because they both wanted to be there, but they can't. And so it's a struggle. And that's kind of what I think Representative Jackson was speaking about, just the trauma. And my prayers for you and your family, because I can only imagine what you're going through, and to not be able to ever have and touch your dad for the last time, or to hug him, or to kiss him on the cheek, or to have the appropriate goodbye. I'm sure he was an amazing man. To actually have the funeral service where people can give the accolades and acknowledgements of a life well lived and a legacy that he left behind is very, very challenging.
And I just want to say, just with my experiences, just even working the Ebola outbreak, and what I hope doesn't really come here as what happened there, is that they started hiding their sick. Mm-hmm. So that they could have those last moments with their
really great point, Dr. K. Great point.
And so they didn't go. we're sending people out, we're going, to homes, tents or whatever. And they were like, no one sick is here, because they wanted those last moments.
Wow.
And in doing that, it made, they were more susceptible and because of that, maybe one or two other family members died, because you think about, it was multiple families in pretty much one household, but that's what they did. And so it, not just wanting to have that closure, that cycle, is important, especially to Black cultures, because that's just how we are. But in other cultures, such as even like in Africa, that's what they did. And so they hid their sick, and then at night they were like, dispose of the bodies the way that they wanted to.
Wow. And that's why I've given pause to this legislation, because there will be a day that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
But once that law becomes law, right now we talk about life after coronavirus, but now we just put a protocol by law to where loved ones will not be able to have that final goodbye if they're in the hospital, right? Now,
wait. So, Representative Jackson, can you just clarify the possible legislation is to make it law that they cannot go?
There is possible legislation, yes. This protocol right now is just a policy. It's a CDC guideline policy. We have individuals on the other side of the aisle taking these policies to write law.
Yes.
This is where we are.
Because that would definitely translate to other similar diseases.
Oh, not only will it translate from the hospital, but nursing homes, any kind of care facility, is the way this law is got this huge umbrella, right? This is where we are. That's why, as my 17-year-old would say, you got to stay woke.
You got to stay woke.
You got to stay woke. They're trying to change voting laws. They're trying to all these laws right now, because it's in retaliation of the person, Captain Jackson, that's no longer in office. It's in retaliation because that individual is no longer in office.
And you wonder why folks feel the way they do.
This is where we are. So you're right, Meaty. This conversation goes beyond just coronavirus now.
Right.
Well, I just want to say, because I know I heard the music cueing on there, Jackie.
You turn it off.
My closing remarks is to just really be informed, be well, live, be informed, and make sure that, to your point that you just clearly stated, Representative Jackson, is that while we are focusing on just COVID right now, other policies are being made behind the scenes, and we have to make sure we are still very astute to, and we need people like you and others that are really making sure that they are able to multitask and have good staff members that are being keen on legislation and policies that are being made that can have a huge impact on the rest of our lives. And how dare one say that when you look at a person like my sister Lynette here, whom I never met, but my heart aches for her because I've been there. I've seen it as a caregiver, as a nurse, as a nursing leader, where I had to fight and advocate and say, no, let the husband come up because this person's about to go. I don't have time for the email. My name is Meaty. Here's my badge. I'll deal with the aftermath of the whatever it is. I'm okay to deal with that because I'm going to advocate. And that too, Lynette, was a true story. Our facility did let, the family come if it was, at the end and it was impending. And, by the time I send the email, that could be hours from now. By the time I get the quote unquote approval. And so we have to make sure humanity is at the forefront of everything that we do. It's all about the human, because if none of us are here, it doesn't matter, period, point blank, it doesn't matter. If I'm not here, it doesn't matter. It's about caring for others, serving for others, and making sure that what we do will have a lasting impact. And whatever policies, Representative Jackson, I will just ask people to always keep asking the why. You know, I think there's a trilogy of I think it's called the 5 whys. Okay, and why? And then what happens after that? And then if that happens, then what? So if you can get to your 5 whys and still be okay with the decision that you made, then go for it. So as a nurse to a legislator, I would say, just keep asking your 5 whys. And if your conscience is okay with that, then go for it. But then I would encourage you to ask them, particularly as it relates to healthcare, and particularly don't make those type of recommendations unless you have a nurse or a physician or somebody that's in the healthcare realm that's at the table. Because how dare I talk about the military? I've never been in the military. I could read a book. I love the movies, but I need to talk to you. You know what I mean? That's what you do. I've never gone into a burning building, and I don't know how the oxygen actually impacts when I open a door. I need Captain Jackson for that. That's what he did. He's the expert. So don't start making laws or policies about, firefighters, and you don't have one at the table. So I would just encourage you, before you all make those decisions, have a Dr. K there, have people who are in the medical field that can respond and answer intelligently about those decisions and what the impact is. Have a survivor family member like Lynette who's there, who can tell you what it feels like to have an amazing dad and you couldn't even go and at least touch his hand or say goodbye, even from the inside, and then make your decision.
Right.
So I want to ask Dr. K. It's been a couple of weeks since we had you guys on. Have you changed your mind about receiving the vaccination yet?
I have not, because again, I don't really interact with the public. Most of what I do is from my home. So it's not that that there's hesitancy. It's just I'm not eligible. I would rather it go to someone who needs it if the opportunity was there, because even in my space, I've had the opportunity. Let me just say that. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't fall in any of those categories. But because when you know people, and this is another reason why there's
Thank you for being ethical.
Yeah, well, yes. But again, you've had concierge doctors signing up to be pandemic providers so that they could give these celebrities who don't fall in any category vaccinations. But my best friend's grandma,
or Lynette's mom, who had to wait.
Yeah, can't even get an appointment. So when I tell you, it's just, I'm not talkative today because I'm just full, because it's just so much going on that people just don't know. And after talking to the teens, and now I'm like, well, what do we do? Now we're dealing with kids returning to school. So, and then now Children's Healthcare is saying, they're seeing more cases of Miss C, because we done forgot about Miss C. Y'all remember Miss C?
Yeah.
And so I have a good friend whose granddaughter is in Nashville, Tennessee, that I spoke with today, who had COVID, but her symptoms weren't the same as an adult. And she had been suffering for like a week. And then they finally took her to a specialist, and she was diagnosed with Miss C. That's today. Wow. And so, it's so much I could say, but we don't have time. But we have to think about not just the psychological impact on our children, because they are scared. Like, they're absolutely scared to death. I have a colleague who has 3 kids, elementary, middle, high school. And the only person that wants to return is a middle schooler, because she's a 6th grader. And so she at least wants that, starting middle school experience, even if it's only for a few months. But the rest of the kids were like, no, let somebody else who need to be in the classroom go. And these are non-Black and brown. And that's where we are. And then we're in such a hurry to send the Black and brown children back into the classroom, because, there's a talk where they're missing out and they're falling behind. But our kids are also the same ones that have the highest rates of asthma. And I asked that question: what do you do for the kids that are asthmatic? What are you going to do because our kids have the highest rate of type 1 diabetes?
Well, that goes back to the whole social economic conversation that Representative Jackson brought early, that it just becomes, it's such a Venn diagram that keeps intersecting. Everything is just intersected, and it all comes back down to a lot of this inequities and disparities and racism and other isms that are out there that we haven't really addressed. And so, for me, just we have to love each other. We have to really bind together as communities. We have to make sure that we're asking the question. I think I shared with you guys back during, I think I showed you guys with Christmas where, and Lord knows I don't have any extra money. I am not rich. Let me not get a paycheck next week. It's going to be a problem. The issue is woman who was in a grocery store, and I think I shared this, I thought I shared it with you guys, but she was paying her bills. Clearly as a grown teenager. He was a senior in high school. His mom was in a little one of the motorized wheelchairs. And when she got there, she started taking, and I'm pissed off because I'm like trying to get somewhere, right? You're always in a hurry. And I'm like, what is this lady doing? And then God arrested my spirit because I realized, wait, she didn't have enough money on her, because DC doesn't give you the cards that they give you for food stamps. You don't get stamps anymore. You just get a debit card. And so you use the card, and I guess the money is loaded onto this card. And so apparently she didn't have enough money, Lynette. And so the lady was like, okay, so she had to take off like $100 out of the stuff. And she didn't have junk food. I mean, she had fruits, she had vegetables, she had a big thing of kale or collards. She had like a couple DiGiorno pizzas, some, like, it wasn't just junk food. And
Right.
the son, you could tell, like, just, and your son, Derek, is, 17. He was just like you could see his spirit leaving his body. And he was a big strapping kid, like, Dad, we don't have any money. And so the lady, and I could tell she was like, I'm sorry, like mouthing to her son. And the cashier is like, young girl, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, not enough. And I'm like, wait a minute. So then she got her total, but she put it on the other register. And I walked behind. I'm like, wait a second. I said, I'm sorry, but was she using, like, what happened? And she goes, she didn't have enough money. And I said, was she on food stamps? And she's like, well, yeah, but her debit card, she didn't have enough money. And I'm like, can you just go ahead and pay for it? And I was like, and I went and I grabbed her and I said, ma'am, if you don't mind, just get it. And she had like a turkey. And it's like, again, it wasn't junk food. And what she had probably could have fed her family for 2 or 3 weeks, with leftovers and stuff. And I just pay for it. And it was like $100 extra. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm like, okay, God, you're going to get me. But my point is that we have to really be sensitized to what's going around us. And I don't say that as a pat on my back. Please.
We have to be aware. You're right.
Yeah, I say that as be mindful and have a watchful eye, because the Bible talks about and tells us, be able how you speak to strangers, because you can be entertaining angels unaware.
Absolutely.
And so if anything, again, just having a heart of service and having a heart of being mindful of community. And that's something that COVID has also taught me, right? That we have to, in this time of a pandemic, I don't have $1,000 to donate to something, but I can come up with $98 and just buy this lady some food. And the son, I mean, you would have thought I gave him like $1 million. He's like, oh, thank you so much, ma'am. And his mother, he's like, God, sweetheart, just God bless you. God bless you. I'm like, he does, and he will, and same to you. And then the ladies behind me, because it was funny, everybody had an attitude because she was taking so long. We've all been there. But I'm like, wow, but the grace of God, that could have been me and my son, Anthony.
Right.
So I just, even for those of you that are watching, Lynette, I mean, Jackie on our show, just, and Captain Jackson said, what can we do? Just little things like that, you guys, to one person, to the world, I'm one media is one person, but to one other person, I can mean the world to them. If I was that nurse that helped Lynette be able to move her dad to the window so she could at least see his face, that meant the world to her, right?
That's right.
That's what it means. You know what I mean? Kenyatta, to be able to reach into the lives of those students that are working, and she has an extra $50 or whatever, to help one of those kids that now aren't going to school, but the grace of God, she's able to help them. And that's also what I hope. Well, that's my point of view, put it out there since I'm on the show. That's my point of view, is that we just have to figure out ways that we can help each other get through this. And thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Derek, for allowing me to really share my story, and hopefully people seeing me, a healthy runner, working out, and I'm dealing with high blood pressure. It sucks. There is no nice medical term. I'm a professional, I'm educated. This sucks. I don't feel great. Sometimes I'm tired. I still feel some pressure here. People who live with blood pressure all the time and don't deal with it, I don't know how you can, because it doesn't feel good. And so we have to share those stories, be vulnerable enough to share your story. People don't have to know my business, but they need to share your story, so hopefully you can touch the life of someone else.
Well said.
We have to get back to that, the core of community. Yep. And humanity that we had. I remember like being at my grandmother's house, and she would cook for everybody. Everybody came over, dropped in, because they knew she would feed them. And we have like checking on neighbors, or just checking on like the elderly. And I've been saying this on every platform that I've been on. I'm like, check on your elderly loved ones, or your neighbors, and just make sure they're okay. If they want to be vaccinated, I'm like dropping stuff, in group chats. This is where you can register. They have vaccines available today. And people are like, oh, thank you, because I was able to get my mom an appointment. I got my cousin an appointment, or, my family in Columbus, Georgia was able, like, thank you, I was able to register them all the way in Columbus, Georgia. And so it's just simple acts of kindness that we have strayed away from. And this pandemic really made people selfish, because number one, we politicized the mask. A simple mask is just a mask. And then you want to talk about, you don't believe it. And like Sister Jackson was saying, she's like, why do you have to see it in order to feel that it's real? Yeah. Because by that time, someone has already died.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I am dealing with, or I am praying for a family right now where the father passed away. The father's sisters just passed away the week before Valentine's Day from COVID. And so they're thinking that the uncle was the one that kind of infected everybody, because when he was sick and went to the hospital and they released him, and even though he was still positive, he went to the mother's house back home, because they didn't even think about it. And if you don't have, and I have been preaching this from day one, we have to have a plan. Since March of last year, you have to have a plan if someone in your home becomes COVID positive. And that's what's putting Black and brown people behind the 8 ball once again, because we are reactive instead of proactive. And we have to take charge of not just our health, but everything that happens to us. And we can't depend on any outside forces to help us. Waiting for somebody to come. And I'm like, who are you waiting for? You have to take control of your health, because the government is not going to get you healthy.
That's not going to pay for the quarantine, Dr. K. Remember I shared that I was with you guys and I was in the hotel room. I happened to work for a company that could have easily cost me $2,000. Easily. So for those of you who are watching, I live in Washington, D.C. If you can't quarantine in your home or have a big enough house or an apartment, I had to quarantine in a hotel, but my job paid for that. So imagine breakfast, lunch, and dinner, no food, no nothing. They were not coming to my room. So you have to do that on your own. So having that plan is another aspect to your point earlier, Captain Jackson, at the beginning of the show. What else can we do? She is 150% correct. I lived it, and I'm sure you did too, Sister Lynette. Like, you have to have a plan, because I couldn't stay in my house because my husband and son were negative by the grace of God. So I went to a hotel, and that could have easily been $2,000.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that they can get through once you are positive. If you isolate yourself or quarantine yourself in a room, that does not mean it's not going to go through the vents and somebody can catch it. That does not mean that you are just sitting in that room. You're supposed to quarantine. That is a way. But if you have somebody that is next door, or in another room next door, that doesn't mean they can't catch it. The vent is right there. That doesn't mean.
Yeah. And there was a case in a hotel where a family went to a hotel. One of the members was positive for COVID, and she used her nebulizer because she had asthma and spread it. People, and so hotel workers walking in the hallway got infected because she was,
it was aerosolized.
Yep.
Wow.
So it's just so much. And what just really irks me is that there are so many people that have popped up to say, oh, I know this, and they're out here talking and they don't know. When I say it's driving me nuts, it's driving me absolutely nuts. So when I go into the community and I'm doing these questionnaires and I'm like, what would make you believe this is real? What would keep you out the club? Because I'm not just talking about like our meeting, not like our group, but like, you know, these ones that every time I was like, don't call me for nothing. You done went on a weekend trip with your boyfriend, and then now you come and don't call me for anything. I don't care. But no, what would make you? And they were like, well, when we turn on the TV, there's nobody that looks like me telling me, nobody that can speak my language, that knows the vernacular. I had a situation where, and they were going to do a campaign, and when I saw the campaign, I said, well, this has a different connotation in the Black community. And you know what they said? Well, we checked the Urban Dictionary and we didn't see anything.
The Urban Dictionary?
The Urban Dictionary?
Where's that dictionary?
Online, I guess. And so I was like, I grew up here. I can tell you, I can call one of my nieces and nephews, somebody right now, and say, if I said this to you, what does this mean?
The dictionary?
The Urban Dictionary.
And listen, I know. Make sure, and I would be remiss not to say this. Even when you are vaccinated, for the viewers that are watching, you still need to ensure, as Dr. K said before, it is still only 90 to 95% efficacy. You never know if you're going to fall on that 5 or 10%. So until we have reached herd immunity, until the vast majority of the 300+ million people in the U.S., so until we have over 200,000 of us that have received the vaccine, you still, yes, the 2 doses does not mean you get to go to Cancun and hang out without a mask. It does not mean you get to get on the airplane. You still have to wear your mask. You still shouldn't be around in a whole bunch of crowds, the social distancing. You still need to wash your hands and do the same thing until everybody else has been vaccinated, because you don't know other comorbidities and other issues that people have. So public service announcement from Meaty and Dr. K, you still gotta, even if you're vaccinated, you still have to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
I recently shared a video with the OPOV team, and it was a video of Tyler Perry, and he had 2 doctors from Atlanta, and he sat down and had a conversation with them. I think I may have shared it with Meaty and Dr. K. Did I send it to you guys?
It was great. It was great.
Okay. Yeah. So we recently viewed that video, and Tyler Perry said, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old or a 5th grader. Said, because people need to understand, because like when there's something I don't understand, I'll tell a person, explain it to me in Barney terms. Like Barney will break it down to you. And if you have any questions, then you're going to ask, okay, you're going to ask those questions. You're going to be able to receive the answers to the point where you'll understand it, as opposed to them using big words. If you don't know what those words mean and you can hardly pronounce them, nor can you spell them. So if they're breaking it down to the people, then maybe they'll understand it a little bit more. Maybe they'll accept it a little bit more, to the point where they can understand it and possibly take the vaccine, or possibly take more precaution, like why it's important to wear your mask. I mean, March is coming up. We may wind up having a double mask. We don't know, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. People don't understand that. But that video
suggested that.
I'm sorry, Lynette.
They've already suggested wearing 2 masks.
I'm already double masked already.
Oh, yeah. Catherine's already double masked.
Yeah. And so that's the problem. And I'll say it, you have people that are out here and they're speaking on platforms that cannot break it down to the level. You talk about disparities, the health vocabulary, they don't know. You have to speak to people at the level. And if I always tell them, if you ask someone a question and they're supposed to be like a subject matter expert in that field, and they can't give you examples and they can't talk to you, you know, on your level, then I would go the other way, because that means they don't really understand it.
Listening to these conspiracy theorists that think they know the answer. If you know the facts that are 500,000 plus people have passed away.
But they don't even think that's real. That's what I'm saying, Lynette. They think like, oh, well, they're doing that to scare us. I'm like, to scare you to doing what?
To do what?
Right.
To do what?
Right.
Again,
yeah, Lynette, listen, when those 21 children at Sandy Hook were brutally murdered in Connecticut, when the Parkland school shooting in Florida, they saying all that was Hollywood.
Yeah.
So they don't even believe that we've been to the moon, right? So I only ask that question to you all because our audience, we want to, again, this is about education and awareness, right? You know, one of the things that Jacqueline said, we really want to use this opportunity to really educate and build awareness on this, so that way those of us that looks like us on this screen can help change the numbers, because we know what it looks like if you don't. And and I know we're about to wrap up the show here, but my final thought for this evening, and it was touched on briefly by Meady and Lynette, and that is this religious aspect. Churches are still closed. We got mega churches in Atlanta. They're still closed. And when you think how God designed us to be able to connect with one another, right? And now you can't even do that once a week. Connect physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so this new normal where churches can't survive without any folks coming through those doors, right? The electricity, utilities, mortgage. And so just like we had over 20% of our restaurants have closed their doors these last 11 months permanently, churches doing the same thing. And so when you start talking about our new normal, you're praying what you eat, how you connect, do these health and welfare checks of your loved ones on the phone, FaceTime, whatever it is. We even do Zoom meetings, family meetings, right? Yeah. We have to still be able to see our loved ones, connect with our loved ones, but more importantly, educate and build awareness. My family members don't even come to me no more talking about whether to get the vaccination or shot, because I told them it's easier to be 6 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart. Let that resonate.
Let that resonate and marinate.
Drop the mic right there. That's a whole word.
Yeah.
All right. I prefer for us to be 6 feet apart, but 6 feet apart, you pick.
All right. Well, guys.
Well, go on,
I love you.
Go on,
that's our truth.
You said it now.
Love you with the love of the Lord.
That's our point of view.
Our point of view.
Thank you guys so much. And again, we're going to keep following you, Meady and Dr. K. We're going to have you guys on in another couple of weeks. So what's going on? Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Lynette. Thank you, Dr. K.
It was such a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
And just remember, guys, everything you heard, that was our point of view. Okay. Mask up.